It was, it's funny because I don't remember shooting that scene, because all I remember is when Craig came in, he's supposed to look sort of, they put lots of dark circles under his eyes, and he's supposed to look like he's worn out, he's been awake for nonstop for 5 days, and all I could think about was like Oliver, that was my first film as well. I had not acted in a film before, and I was getting used to where the lights were and the guys sticking microphones under your armpit, and we were in a room, and the woman who played my boss in the movie, Beatrice Straight, was this, she just won an Academy Award a few years before for this movie Network, and I was just kind of overwhelmed. It's hard to remember that. All I remember is they just kept putting dark circles under Craig's eyes, and that the sound guy kept saying to me, "You're talking too loud. The microphone is right there. You don't have to worry. You're not in the theater." So most of my experience at that point had been in the theater. So I was learning about the technical things at that point.
Okay.
And trying to find your light. It's really tough in movies. They have lights stuck everywhere, and like you've seen movies about movies, and you have to. It's called your key light, and you have to make sure you're in the. Doing it right now. You have to make sure you're in the light so the camera picks you up, and don't talk too loud. And plus, you have to make sure you don't want to overact like in your close-up, so that in the group scene you have to match what you're doing in the group scene to whatever it is that you do in the close-up. You have to make sure you move the pencil, because we were all sitting at a table with pencil, and you had to make sure the pencil was in the right hand when you took the notes in the close-up and in the long shot. And that first day was just, it was almost overwhelming.
Yeah. Well, coming from stage
where everything is so huge, and then on screen, a millimeter is.
Well, that's what I told Oliver that the very first shot I had to do was the scene at the table where the coffee pot slides back and forth, and there were 7 of us at the table, and it took something like 14 hours to shoot, because they had to shoot the master, and then they had to shoot everybody's individual close-ups, and there was practical special effects.
Sure.
Lights were flashing. They actually had real pops of flash they had wires hanging from the ceiling, and there were these flash bulbs going off, and we had to time that specifically to a certain word, and plus the camera was moving around, and it was harder than I expected it to be, because in this theater you kind of walk out. Anybody in here that's done a play before, you walk out on the stage and you talk and you say your lines, and movies are so technical. Every single thing you do is all about how far the camera is. There's always a guy with a tape measurer going like this to make sure that you're going to be not only in the frame, but that you're going to be in focus. So, yeah.
And we talked about You with the Tree. With you had that scene with all of the room where everything's swirling around and everything like that. Can you talk about how that played? And the lighting must have been very complicated for that, not to mention all the effect.
Well, the thing that was so strange about that scene was, there was a long hallway, and we had to do this very, very complicated technical dialogue walking down that hallway, and it was all about the rotoscope of the something and the fluctuation of the ions were creating the things, and we were all having trouble memorizing that. And then all of a sudden we got to a doorway, and when the doorway opened up, what you saw in the movie was compasses flying around, and the books flapping, and the music playing, and the record players. Well, what we saw was a big giant, back then it was blue screens, now it's green screens. We opened the door, and basically we saw a big giant blue screen that was absolutely blank, that later on they were going to go up to ILM and shoot all the things flying around. And what we got, though, was Toby was behind the camera directing, and they had the camera pointing at us through the doorway, and Stephen was standing on the other side of the camera with a huge pointer, like you'd have in a classroom. And Beatrice Straight said, "Well, what exactly are we looking at?" And Stephen said, "Well, we don't quite know yet. We just know that all the things in the room are going to fly around, and ultimately something is going to fly at you, probably a compass." So Stephen stood there with a pointer, and Toby would yell action, sitting up on the crane of the camera, and we would kind of open the door, and then the 3 of us had a discussion about, what do you think we're looking at? And Beatrice was like, "Well, I think it's books," and Richard said, "I think it's the rocking horse," and Stephen had a pointer, and he would literally stand behind the film over the dialogue, and he would go, "Look here, look here, look here, look here," and the 3 of us are like, we look like idiots, like cats, or dogs looking at something, and then finally, and then the very end, he would say, okay, and now the compass is coming at you, and he would stick this pointer in Beatrice's face, and she would shriek and go like this, and we felt like jerks standing there for about 6 hours shooting this thing over and over and over again. And then when you see the movie, the effect is so wonderful because we open up that door, and there's that wonderful, and that great, it's the record player, it's playing like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star and all that, and it was astonishing, and they matched it exactly to what we were looking at, those ILM guys up there.
It's amazing.
But once again, it was all real things. It wasn't CGI. It was all real books and things flying around in the sky.
Back to casting again, and a unique relationship that you had on set was with Heather in your scenes with her. Obviously someone that's a treasure character for fans of the series. Can you talk about your relationship with her?
Immediately when we started working together, we were like a brother and sister, and we used to play with each other. We had just a great time just being kids, and we really never thought the fact that we were really acting. And I think that's why we probably had the chemistry we did on screen, is that we truly thought of ourselves as a family, and that just tied into the way that Craig and Jobeth treated us too. And, you shoot a lot of movies, and I think I was really spoiled on Poltergeist, where the moment someone calls cut, everyone heads to their trailer. Well, we really never did that on Poltergeist too. We'd hang out, everyone would play, we'd ride bicycles together, we'd have a lunch together. What happened was my mom actually broke her arm on the set when we were going to like a doctor's appointment, and I was all of a sudden at 10 years old. I was pretty much alone by myself during this production, which at first I was panicked about it, and the school teacher I had wasn't so nice to me. So I really had no one there for me except Steven and the cast. So they truly did become my family, and it was just so nice to have these warm faces when I could escape from the schoolhouse and back to the soundstage. And Heather was just my friend, and we played with our toys, and we did everything that a normal brother and sister probably would have done.
And she had, it's said that she had this ability to memorize script and screenplay and things like that for everybody in the scenes. Did you find that to be true, where she knew where everybody should be and what they should be saying?
Yeah, I think Heather was really beyond her years in terms of her intelligence. I think she was 4 or 5 years old when she was on that production. And she was so, I wouldn't say the word precocious, because I think you can relate to the someone's slightly obnoxious, and she wasn't. She was just extremely intelligent, and I always wonder what would have happened to her, what she might have become. She even talked about being a filmmaker possibly one day, and I believe that she might have had that potential. And it's true. She knew all her lines. She knew her lines better than any of us, I think.
Yeah.
It's just amazing what someone at that level and their capability at that age, what they could have done, and do.